Alright, so last week we kind of tapped into this idea of what rest is. And what we're saying is that we as a society are absolutely horrible at rest. The way we rest, how often we rest, it's a recipe for disaster. And we challenge ourselves to look at the way we rest and ask, like, well, what does it say about us as individuals? And pretty much what it says is that we rest in order to get up and go and produce and to go back at it and to be productive and so on. And if we rest, we're afraid that we'll hear these voices and say, like, well, we're not aggressive enough, or we don't produce enough, or we're not successful enough. Or if you take a break, that the person next to you isn't taking a break, and they're going to keep on working, and they're going to get the position that you get because you rested, and they didn't. So we struggled, we talked about the way that we rest, and then we challenge ourselves to say, like, okay, well, what does God say about rest? And God had a lot to say about rest. God had a lot to say about rest, and we looked at a couple different ways that God spoke about rest in the Old Testament. First way that he talked about rest was when he brought us out of Egypt. Okay, we were slaves in Egypt, and they had to work in order to survive. He brought them out of Egypt, and finally said, like, you are no longer slaves, you can rest. You can rest. Then he showed them a couple different things. He said, all right, 6 days you will work, and on the seventh day you will rest, which is the Sabbath. When we looked at the 10 Commandments, we put a big screenshot of all 10 Commandments, and lo and behold, the longest commandment of the 10 Commandments is about the Sabbath. It's about resting. Right? It is by far the longest commandment, and it beats out commandment number 4 by a whole verse. Okay, it's a whole verse longer than commandment number 4, but the commandment on Sabbath is the longest one. He also gave us manna. He gave his people manna, which for 6 days they would work in order to survive. But on the seventh day, he would give them, or on the sixth day, he would give them an extra helping of manna, which allowed them not to work on the Sabbath day, but yet God would provide, teaching them to trust in him, teaching them that you don't have to work all the time, and that he made a day that was holy. And then he extended that Sabbath, and he said, every 7th year, you will stop working for a whole year. You will not till the land for a whole year, and whatever you do on the 6th year will be enough to last you the 7th year. So rest was important to God. Okay, rest was very important to God, and when the Israelites neglected the Sabbath, they got themselves in a whole heap of trouble because they put other gods before God. And as a result, they were sent to exile for 70 years. And there's a verse in 2 Chronicles when God says through his prophet to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed her Sabbath, as long as she lay desolate, she keeps the Sabbath to fulfill 70 years. So the Israelites neglected Sabbath for so many decades and centuries that the Lord said the land will rest for all 70 years to make up for all the missed rest because we were just working too hard. And then lastly, when the Israelites came back and they built the temple and they opened up the book of the law and ever read it, they reinstituted and recommitted themselves to Sabbath. So Sabbath and resting, the way God intended to rest, is extremely important. And so when we look at rest today, this is the way how most of us This is the way most of us rest. We work, and then we crash, and we break, and we go on vacation. And then we get back, and we work, quick little break, work, and then we crash. This is the way that we commonly rest, okay? But when we looked last week, the way God intended for us to rest was there was work, and then there was rest. And then there was work, and then there was rest. How do we know that? When we look at the Sabbath, God said 6 days you will work, then on the 7th day, that's holy. That wasn't like, apply this when you want. This was weekly. This was every week. You'll work for 6 days. But the seventh day is a special day. The seventh day, I'm going to make it holy. I'm going to look at this day and treat it like none of the other 6 days. Right? In God's creation. 7 days. Which day of all the days did he say was the most holy? The seventh day. It was the day of rest. Not the day of work, where he produced so much, produced the world. Okay? He didn't call those days holy. He called the last day holy. Alright? I was in a meeting with clergy, and we were talking about a potential visit from the Pope. And this caught my attention because as we were trying to plan the schedule, the stipulation coming from the Pope saying, the Pope will visit and do things on 6 days, but 1 day a week he won't do anything. 1 day a week, the Pope, when he comes for just a couple weeks, the amount of churches and people and issues like he has to do, the Pope was saying, I'll take 1 day a week to rest. Right? I was shocked by that. I was shocked by that our Pope was saying that even though there's a lot to work, 1 day I will stop from my work. Alright? So rest is really important. And we need to learn to live from a place of rest. Many of us live from a place of production. Okay? We live from a place of doing. But really, God is saying, no, you need to live from a place of rest. Alright? Resting is not the same as being lazy. Okay? There's a difference. Alright? There's a difference of resting the way God wants us to do, and resting because we just can't go on anymore, so then I veg in front of the TV and watch series after series and Netflix and so on. That's lazy. Alright? And that's crashing. But resting is different, and living from a place of rest is important because what were the 2 greatest commands that God gave us? Greatest command is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Second is love your neighbor as yourself. Okay? I don't know about you, but I struggle to do 1 and 2. Okay? I struggle to love God with all my heart, soul, and mind, and I struggle to love those around me in the same way. We have a great calling as followers of Jesus Christ to love Him and to love others. Life is about learning to love well. Okay? It's about learning to love well, love God well, and love others. And God wants us to do it out of the rest that we find in Him. Because loving others is not easy. Loving your spouse is not easy. Loving your kids isn't easy. Loving your friends isn't always easy. So we need to do it out of a place of rest. Because when we are run thin in life and we're exhausted, it becomes really difficult to love others. Our bandwidth to tolerate life has shrunk, and so we become irritable, we become sassy and angry and all these different things. Why? Because we're run thin, we have no rest. So God talked a lot about Sabbath. So what is Sabbath? Sabbath, simply put it, it's a 24-hour period of rest every 7 days. It's a 24-hour period of rest every 7 days. Jewish practices, they did it from sundown to sundown. Alright? In the eyes of God, this was by far the most important day. It was a day of rest. Okay? He made, of all the days, He made this one the most holy day. Now, there are a couple key components that make sure that this day is not the same as the other days, and we're going to get into that. But as we talk about this idea of a 24-hour block of time once a week, some of us may think like, well, is this legalistic? Are we just being legalistic about like another religious thing that we need to do and kind of pile it in with all the fasting that we do Wednesday and Friday and 2/3 of the year, and I got to do this and I got to do this? We can approach Sabbath as legalistic. Okay? And sometimes, like, our mindset is that, something like this is very legalistic. But I want to challenge us to say, is it legalistic or life-giving? Okay? And I think the way that God has set it up Sabbath is very life-giving, not legalistic. Where does the legalism come from? The Talmud, which is one of the Jewish texts, which really taught them how to live, has 39 different rules of things you can't do on Sabbath. Okay? If you have had a Jewish co-worker, like, they may have shared some of their Sabbath practices. And maybe your impression of it was, that's so legalistic. All right? Like, I always find the one interesting where one of my Jewish friends said, like, yeah, I have to pre-cut my toilet paper the night before to make sure I don't cut toilet paper the day of. Okay? I was like, really? Okay? But, I don't know. I didn't go and research it. I can't confirm it in the Talmud, like, that's what needs to happen. But certain things like that may make us think that Sabbath rest is legalistic. But it's not legalistic. It's life-giving. Just like all the other tools that we have in Orthodoxy, they're part of an external framework for an internal journey. Okay? They're the tools that we implement. They're part of an external framework for an internal journey. Right? And if we use Sabbath in the right way, it has great potential to be life-giving. So I want to talk about, well, what are these life-giving possibilities of Sabbath? And there's a couple things that come to mind. All right? When we look at Sabbath and stopping one day out of the week to rest, it begins to redefine our identity as individuals. Okay? It begins to redefine our identity as individuals. When we look at society and the secular world, are you ever to be unreachable? No. Like, you always have your phone on your phone. Everybody, like, you can't find a flip phone anymore. It becomes really difficult to find a flip phone. Everybody has to get a smartphone. It's actually more expensive to have a flip phone than it is to have a smartphone. All right? We can't get away from people. Why? Because when work calls or somebody calls or something like that, we need to have it. Like I was saying last week, we need to be so efficient that taking our phone out of our pocket and looking at it is too long, so now we have watches that tell us what our phone is doing, okay, when an email comes. So when we stop and rest and we begin to block out all this communication and constant communication, it begins to redefine our core identity from somebody who is, like, has to produce to somebody who will produce, okay, but for 6 days, and on the 7th day, say, no, I'm going to rest. Why? Because God will provide on the 7th day. Just like He provided the Israelites with manna on the 7th day, He will provide whatever it is I need on that 7th day so that I can rest. We no longer have to continue to work all the time and be reachable all the time. By intentionally stopping for 24 hours, we combat this invasive mentality that says our value comes from what we produce. We actually say that, no, my value doesn't come from what I produce. My value comes from God. And I'm willing to stake a whole day on it. That my value comes from God. That my life will not fall apart if I stop for 24 hours. That all the things I need to do will eventually get done. But I will stop. And I give you the example of B&H Photo last week. The second largest non-chain photo company in the world, centered in New York, closes from Friday to Saturday. And when asked why they close on Black Friday, they said, we respond to a higher call, or higher authority. So when we stop, it says something about our value. It says where we derive our value from. It derives our value. We begin to shift our identity from being on what we produce to what we, the God that we love. So it redefines our core identity. The second thing it does is this is a huge part of our spiritual formation as individuals. We talk about prayer and scripture and confession and communion as being the most important, right? And these tools are essential to how we form our spiritual life. And everybody has like a different mix of them. But I think stopping to rest and being focused on God is quite possibly like another extremely powerful tool that we have let go to the wayside because of how busy our society is. If you look at our church at large, We have men and women who have shown us that they are leaving the busyness of this world in order to go and to be with God. It says something about the importance of that relationship and cultivate it. Sabbath and stopping for 24 hours allows us to actually sit in the presence of God long enough to really know that He loves us. Some of us move around so fast from thing to thing and event to event and all these different things, and our to-do lists are crazy that we miss. We know mentally God loves me, sure. That's my Sunday school answer. But too many of us haven't really indoctrinated that belief into our hearts. And it shows by the way we live. It can't be something that we just say mentally. Understanding the love that God has for us challenges us to say, okay, if God loves me and I stop, will He provide? And we'll see that He provides. But when we don't have a solid understanding and belief of His love in our life, it becomes really hard to stop because we think everything will fall apart. But God reminds us. He says, I hold the world up. I hold everything together. And when you stop, everything's just fine. But we struggle. Do we see Sabbath in the liturgical life of the church? Is it something we practice as a church? How? I see some head nods. How do we practice Sabbath as a church?
Sunday.
I agree, Sundays, but I think you're still shortening it. We practice Sabbath as a church every week. What happens Saturday and Vespers? We start. We begin to kind of leave the busyness of our week and Saturday, and we begin to kind of focus our efforts and our mind towards God with Vespers. And then after Vespers, what do? We step into the midnight praises. And in the midnight praises, what do we sing about? We sing about all the times that God has provided for His people in ways that they could not provide for themselves, reminding us that when we stop, God continues to provide what we need. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes we forget how much God has provided. So that's why as a church we sing about in the midnight praises how God has provided for us. We talk about how He saved the Israelites from Pharaoh, how He provided for them in the wilderness for 40 years with manna. We talk about the 3 youth in the fire, how God has provided when we stop, when we rest. To remind ourselves that while we are stepping away from the world, that God is taking care of things. And then we continue through the night and into the morning, and then we come and we celebrate with liturgy, and we partake of His body and blood to remind us that He is continually loving us and that He is continually providing for us. So in the liturgical life of the church, we have it every 7 days. Okay? But we've shortened it. Okay? We've shortened it. Vespers is tough. Okay? So I attend liturgy. Liturgy, now, it's how can we cram everything into 2 hours of liturgy because everybody's got to go. And then, I know we have a lot of students, and the school year is coming up, we just finished liturgy, I need to go, I need to study. All right? We're so anxious to get out. We have a hard time slowing down. We have a hard time stopping. But in the liturgical life of the church, it's built in. Sabbath is a time and space for revelation. By far, one of the most common questions that people ask me is, how do I hear God's voice? How do I hear what God is asking me to do? How do I hear what He's doing? And when you look at life for these individuals, okay, and I'm in that group too, all right? Life is always on the run. We want God's message on the run. How? When I have this great app, it sends me a verse every day. That's perfect. Okay? When I'm in the car on the way to work, I pray the parts of the Igbeah. I was like, okay, how much of the Igbeah do you have memorized for you to pray the parts? And how long is your commute? All right? This is what we do. I get an email in my inbox every day with a meditation for me to do. Okay. That's great. When I fold laundry, that's when I pray. Okay. When I'm yelling at my kids, I'm asking God for strength. All right? That's when we pray. But I don't know what he's saying. I can't hear him. Well, we gotta slow down. Like, we're not all of a sudden going to come as a society. And even though the societal norm is to live life at a pace that is faster than humanly possible for us, and expect God to all of a sudden change his ways on how he communicates. Just because something is popular in society and a certain way of communicating is popular in society does not mean God's going to all of a sudden pick it up. It's like, oh, Twitter is how people like communicate. God's going to open a Twitter account. No, he's not. He's not going to change the way he communicates. He will communicate effectively for you as an individual, but he's not going to fall into the mass rush of how society communicates. So if we're going to be in touch with him, if we're going to be united with him, then there has to be time and space for God. As much as we like our apps and our emails and so on, I'm the first to admit, when I get the Bible verse every day from a couple different sources, I open and close. When we have big questions about our marriage and what to do, we need time and space. When we have questions about where God is leading us in life and we need more clarity, we need time and space. We need quietness. We need to shut things down. Can't have my phone with me all the time. And trust me, I'm telling you about making fun of the phone. I can't tell you how much I struggle with this. I can't tell you how much I personally struggle with checking phone, checking text message, and all this stuff, and emails and stuff like that. I'm terrified to know the number of times I probably open up my email app in a day. Okay? I think it would just blow my mind. But if we want God to be real to us, there needs to be time and space. There needs to be time and quietness. A couple weeks ago was the Feast of Transfiguration. And Transfiguration, yes, was Jesus revealing his glory to us. But Jesus contained all his glory all the time. Okay, Jesus didn't change during the Feast of Transfiguration. Who changed during the Feast of Transfiguration? Peter, James, and John. Because they saw his glory. They were away. They were up on the mountain. Nobody else was there. God revealed himself to them. And because they saw his revelation, it induced a change in them. But when we have no time for God to be revealed to us, how do we expect change? What change are we going for? Because he is the model of change. He is what we are going for. We are trying to be in his image, live in his image and in his likeness the way we're created to be. So if we're going to do that, then we have to have the picture of the one we're aiming to be, the one we're aiming to imitate. And that's not going to happen on the fly. It's not going to happen when we're so busy. It's going to happen when we stop. When we slow down. When we say, I'm not what I produce. When we say, God, you will take care of what happens on the seventh day. But I will sit and be in front of you. Sabbath is time for revelation. But really, what sets Sabbath apart? And we're going to talk about 4 key characteristics of what sets Sabbath apart. First thing is we need to stop. We need to learn how to stop. Both from our paid work, like our jobs, and our unpaid work, which is homework, which is not what you get from your teachers, that's what you do to keep your home going. Okay? All the things that you need to do to keep your home or apartment going, that's homework. That's the work you got to do so you have a door to walk through every day. All right? But even that work needs to stop. Okay? Needs to stop because how many of us, if we were given a full day have more things than we can do, like that we need to do for our house. Okay? We have more stuff in our house than we know we actually have. And somehow we got to keep it all together. We have more things than we know we have. Why? How do we know that? Like when we dig through things like during snow days and we're like, whoa, I didn't know I had this anymore. Like we have so much stuff. And we have so much, and it takes so much upkeep. So when we stop for Sabbath, we need to stop from our paid and unpaid work, which is our homework, our oil changes, our doctor's appointments, and things like that. And we need to put like clear boundaries on Sabbath, okay? To not let it be so with the wind, all right? To say like, this is like when I'm going to start it, and this is when I'm going to stop it, okay? And share it to people who are closest to you so that they can know. That they know, like, okay, from this time to this time, I'm not going to be able to reach you. And that's okay. I'm not going to respond to your text, not because I don't like you, but because I'm stopping. And if you don't get a response from me in 12 to 24 hours, it's okay. I'm alive. Okay? So we need to stop. Okay, we need to stop from responding to emails at work. All right? It was funny, I was talking to some person, and very successful, going to the pharmacy, and they go on vacations, like quite a few. And the vacations come with one condition, that he gets to work every day on vacation for the first half of the morning. Some of us go on vacation, and what we do, oh, fine, I can catch up with all this work that I've been putting off at work. That's what we do on vacation. Right? We need to learn to stop. And then we need to rest. And rest is always a little bit different from everybody. But I want us to think of rest in the terms of what brings life to us. Not what allows us to be brainless people. Okay? We think of rest like, I just got off this long shift, and I just need to be brainless and I'm going to watch TV. And we call that rest. That's not rest. That's you've reached your limit. You've reached your emotional, mental, and spiritual capacity that you can't do anything else except veg. That's not resting. That's like trying to come back to life. That's like CPR. Okay? That's not resting. Resting is about what is going to bring you life. What is going to make you happy. I always think of the hobbies that you like to do when you were young, that life got so busy that you don't know what they are anymore. I always think it's interesting asking people who are approaching the age of retirement, say, aren't you looking forward to a retirement? What are you going to do? And they're like, I have no idea what I'm going to do in retirement. Really? We got this whole earth, such beauty, and beyond your office, you don't know what to do. We have churches that are dying for help because the harvest is plenty. I don't know what to do. I'm afraid of retirement. I've never spoken to my husband that much before. What am I doing? I'm going to talk to them all the time. We're both going to be at home. He's retired, I'm retired. We actually have to have a marriage. People who don't know how to rest. Okay? Some people like hiking, reading. Some people like to cook a meal. Some people really like to go out and enjoy a nice meal. Exercise, sports. It's different. You ask me, I finally brought back one of my childhood things. I like to build little plastic models. It's kind of cool. It's a slow project. It happens over a couple months. Do a little bit every night. Not every night, but every once a week or something like that. I get to paint the pieces the way the model actually says it and stuff like that. It takes a while, but it's okay. It reminds me of my childhood. Something I enjoy to do. Right? So resting. It's important to rest. And then delight. Right? After God spent 6 days creating the world, he looked back and he said, this is good. He looked back at what he had created, man and woman, garden, universe. He said, this is good. It's a time to be thankful. It's a time to celebrate. It's time to look at the world around us nature and the ocean, like enjoy and delight in the relationships that we have, and celebrate the people that are around us. Delight in the life that God has given us. And I want to bring up a verse from Galatians 5:24. It says, "And those who are Christ have crucified the flesh with its passions and its desires." And I want to talk about this verse and differentiate it from delight. Okay? What I'm not talking about during delight, while you delight in Sabbath, okay, is like letting your passions go wild. Okay? To say, I'm going to have a smashing good day today, and do whatever I want, and go shop and not care about anything, and personal viewing on the internet is not about giving into your passions, the ones that we struggle with. Okay, the passions to judge other people, the passions to be selfish, and all these things. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about in the things that God has created that is good, and God created a lot that is good, but we don't stop to appreciate it. He created the family structure, the marriage between the husband and wife, and the kids, and the joy that's in those relationships. Delighting in those, delighting in the world around us. He called us to delight in those. He did call us to crucify our passions, which were evil in nature. But sometimes we think that in order to be a good servant, I have to give up the things that I like in order to sacrifice for the ministry. That's not it. You like music? Play music. Music is life-giving. You like nature? Go take a walk in nature. It's going to make your service 100 times better rather than going and living to whatever untamed passions you have inside of you. There's a difference between delighting and the passions that we're talking about in Galatians 5:24. We want to embrace the things that God has created that are good. And last thing, okay, there's a fourth part of really what separates Sabbath from the other days of the week is contemplate. Okay? Sabbath is time to be with God, not time off of God. Okay? Sabbath is taking time to be with God, not taking time to be off of God. Okay? Most of our secular time off is time off from God as well. Okay? When I've reached my limit and I have to stop and I'm about to crash, I don't have the mental capacity, emotional or spiritual capacity to commune with God. I depleted myself to the end. And what's the only thing that I can do? Click on the TV, go to sleep for 14 hours. All right? That's not what we're talking about here. Sabbath is a time to meditate on God. It's a holy day to the Lord. All right? If you've been on a mission trip, it's the mission trip effect. Okay? We go on a mission trip, we do all these great things. We have a structured quiet time in the morning. We have a Bible study at night. We serve during the day. We get to our mission trip. Oh, it was awesome. And I love this and I want to do this all the time. Is it a surprise we feel like that? No. It's not like spiritual magic that happens. It's somebody who has left their normal routine, gone into a routine of prayer and service and meditating on God, and then they feel overjoyed. Surprise? No, not a surprise. Okay? Is it magic? Absolutely not. There's structure behind a fulfilling spiritual life. When we come to Sabbath, it's a time to find that similar joy, but we want to do it rhythmically. We want to do it week to week. So we're not going all year and then waiting for the mission trip in order to go here and then end up down here. What we want is we work and then we rest, and then we work and then we rest. So I know I'm constantly communing with God. That work doesn't run my life. So taking a time to spend time in Scripture, to look at your rule of life, evaluate your rule of life, to think about the things in life that need space, the things that you want to bring to God and pray about. This is the time to do it. So we have four big things that begin to differentiate Sabbath from just a regular day off. They're stopping, resting, delighting, and contemplating on God. That's a holy day. That's a different day than the other 6 days of my week. And that's a day that can reshape my core identity, is a powerful tool in the spiritual my spiritual upbringing, and is a way for me to really live in God's presence. And to say, I concretely trust Him. Many of us, like we go and yeah, I trust God. Show me. Show me how, concretely, how you trust. But when we look, we can't find that. We give anything up. We hold on to everything so tight. But I trust God. Okay? Well, show me. Sometimes, we need to implement something concrete into our daily routine to remind us that I will trust God, that I do trust God. So, last couple things about Sabbath, okay? Be patient. Trying to block off a 24-hour period in your schedule is not going to come like that, all right? Some of us have schedules that are so busy, it's hard to find 30 minutes. Sometimes hard to find an hour, okay? It takes time. Children of Israel took a very long time to get this. For 400 years, they were in slavery. Then they came out of slavery, and God was trying to show them how to rest. They didn't get it. They kept on I got to collect a lot of men to make sure I last on the Sabbath. And everything they tried to collect over rotted. And God was like, no, I will provide for you. Resting and stopping doesn't come easy. When you look at our society, stopping is very counter to what society is doing. So to say that taking time off is going to come easy is an understatement. So we need to give ourselves time in looking at our schedule and saying okay, I am going to delineate this time to this time to rest. All right? And it's important. If you can't do 24 hours, that's fine. Start with, I would say, minimum 3-4 hours. To just stop. Where your phone is in the other room. The computer is not in front of you. To where people can't get a hold of you. Challenges them. 4 hours out of the week. Where you're praying. Where you're doing something that fits one of the 4 guideposts. Stopping, resting, delighting, and contemplating. Choose something. You don't have to fit all 4 all in one, but choose a 4-hour block in your week. And if you're looking at your week and saying, I can't find 4 hours, I wish you were here for the sermon. Because your life will be a mudslide. And it will wipe out something significant in your life. Alright? So 4-hour minimum block of time. Be patient with yourself. It takes time. Set up boundaries around this block of time. Alright? You will have plenty of bad Sabbaths until you figure out how to Sabbath. Alright? You will sometimes get to this 4-hour block of time and be so stressed out because of things that are pending, things that you wanted to get to that you didn't get to, your mind is somewhere else. You will have a couple of bad days, okay, mixed in the process, okay? But you are doing something. Excuse me. That's all right. Okay, you'll have plenty of bad days. Okay, you're doing something that is a complete shock to your mind and to your schedule. So it'll take time, you'll have bad days, but it's important that you see the big picture in what this day can bring. Okay? If we function all the time without seeing a big picture, then whatever happens in the moment will dictate what we do. Okay? If we function in life without having a big picture for what we're trying to achieve, then what happens in the moment deters us. If you start college and you say, I want to get to this degree, okay, you will weather a bad class. But if you start college and be like, I don't know what I want to do, and you have a bad class, I'm dropping out. Same for me. You need a big picture. I love this verse in Mark, where it says, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. This day was made holy for you, for me, because there's such power in it. There's so much power in this day. But can we slow down enough to tap into its potential? It was made for us. It was a gift for us. Nobody We'll go to God and say, God, like I have so much to do, but I'm going to give this day up for you, and God's going to throw you on your face. So no, I will show you. I will show you that I provide. Okay? He may provide in ways that you didn't want. Okay? He may do things that you thought he would do something else. Okay? But at the end, in the big picture, God will provide through this day. Nobody has come to him and said, God, I will give you a holy day of my week for you. And God says, you should have worked. He doesn't say that. He says, good, now we can step into a relationship. And I'm going to show you how you can trust me. And I'm going to speak to you. I'm going to make my presence felt in your life. And my presence in your life on this one day is going to give you what you need to love your spouse, to love your children, to love your co-workers, to be a light in this world. To be a light in this world, we have to do something different. So when God said 6 days you will work, and this one, this is holy. It's a big challenge. I was going to share Sabbath experiences because it's something that me and Sarah and our family have been doing for the last 3 years, and it is it's unspeakable what it has brought to our life. Okay, so feel free to come talk to me or even talk to Sarah, and we'd be happy to share with you what our Sabbath experience is like. But for us and our family, it's every Monday. Every Monday, we turn off as best as possible from the world, and it's our time to Sabbath. So we can share with that, but I won't leave it. Any questions?
I just have a comment. I just wanted to say, for us, Sabbath is really a lifeline because we really do need time to rest. It's a day where we have fun. It's a day where we get to pray, we get to play, and because we have small children, we help each other out with that too. But it really is a lifeline, and I know we're all strained, and it's really difficult to take a day off, but I also want to say that Abuna and I make significant, we make sacrifices to do this. We make financial sacrifices to do this. We make, just sacrifices in terms of our need for production, but it's just a lifeline for us. So yeah, I'd be happy to talk to anybody about it. And yeah, it's good to be able to take that time to know that you are not what you produce, and to be able to just to have that, to know if it's a really difficult Thursday or Friday, Sabbath is coming, and that's why it's such a lifeline for us.
Any other questions? And the total most important day of my week, for sure. Stand up, we'll pray. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Spirit, one God, and I thank you, Lord, for all you've given to us. We ask you, Lord, that you would continue to bless us day by day, that you would give us the strength to give you our time, to stop, to rest, to delight in you, to be with you. It's amazing what it is we have the potential to gain if we would just slow down enough to hear you, to hear your voice. Thank you, Lord, for this gathering, this community, a chance to celebrate our second year anniversary. And we ask, Lord, that you would bless us in this upcoming year. In the recessions of our seats, we praise you from the beginning. Hear us as we say, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. In Christ Jesus our Lord, let us kingdom. Now, Lord God, the Father, the grace of his only begotten Son, our Lord God and Savior Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit be with you all. Go in peace and Lord be with you.